I now call this regular meeting of Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Director Potts, you want to lead us again?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Director Snyder, would you please read the board priorities?
The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and the district, including the health, safety, and security and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you. Director Beck, would you please read the mission and vision statements?
The mission statement: to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. And the vision statement is education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. We will now move on to presentations. We have a presentation on open enrollment. I will turn it over to you, Mr. Smith.
Yes, thank you. With us today, we have our Davenport School Specialist, Marty Schultz, who is at home who is not feeling the best, but has decided to electronically join us in our meeting. So, Marty, can you hear me?
And TJ.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, yep. And so Marty has a short presentation for us. Basically, we're going to describe, where we were with open enrollment, what are the changes to the new laws, and what does that data look like for us as of today. So, Marty, if you would go ahead and take over the presentation. I believe, Brenda, you have the presentation there. Joe's got it. Thank you. Okay.
It says I am now sharing my screen. I'm not sure if that is coming through or not.
It is, Marty.
Okay. I'm gonna hit present mode here. I want to say thanks to the directors for having me this evening, and I apologize for not being there in person. Like TJ said, I am recuperating from what I'm sure is a perfectly normal cold after my kindergartner started school 3 weeks ago. So here's a quick update about open enrollment. Just to let you know, I don't consider myself, the biggest of experts on this. TJ asked me to kind of oversee this process in the spring when Corey Guy moved into a different position. And so I've prepared this for you to the best of my ability, and I'm happy to seek out other answers if you have more questions. You may be aware that the law changed over the spring in late May with the passage of House Files 228 and 847 that brought changes to open enrollment. Prior to that, there were 5 districts in the state of Iowa that had voluntary diversity plans. Those were Davenport, Des Moines, Postville, Waterloo, and West Liberty. And by law, those plans were permitted because our school districts had a percentage of minority students that exceeded the percentage of minority students at the state level by at least 20 points. And within a school district, that could also govern transfer option requests between schools. If there was a school within a district, again, that had a minority population that exceeded the average minority population for that district by 20 points. So under that system, requests to open enroll would be denied if they led to a greater imbalance in the demographic balance of the district. So, for example, if there was a family who identified as being white and wanted to open enroll out, a family would have to open enroll in who listed from the same demographic group in order to sort of open up a seat for that family to open enroll out. So we had a lottery system in place. Again, this is before my time in this process, where any families who applied before the March 1st deadline would be put into a lottery. A random number generator would be used, and then those families would be allowed to open enroll out by choice. Prior to the passage of House File 228, 9 of the 70 students who applied to open enroll out, which would have gone into effect for this school year, 9 of those 70 applicants were granted. That was actually, there were only 7 slots open at that time, but the last person who was drawn had 2 siblings as well. So that family was able to have 3 students open enroll out. Now, prior to the passage and the change of the laws, there were still a lot of reasons why families would be able to open enroll out of Davenport. I do want to go back and remind everyone that open enrollment governs when a family who is residing in one district in the state of Iowa would like to enroll their child into a different district in the state of Iowa. It does not include districts in Illinois, and it does not include moving between schools within a district. That's considered a transfer option request. So these are some of the reasons why students were able to open enroll out prior to the change in the law. A continuing enrollment would be if a family had previously been enrolled in a neighboring district, for example, Bettendorf. If they had moved into a residence within Davenport's boundaries, but wanted to stay enrolled in Bettendorf, they were allowed to do that under a continuing open enrollment. There was also an Iowa transfer rule, which meant that if there was a family who was open enrolled to a district and then their resident district changed, they could choose to continue that open enrollment into the previous district. I already mentioned this one, but a sibling rule: if a family had already attained open enrollment status into another district, any of their siblings could then also attend that district. So you'll see in some of our data in a little bit, we have had families who have resided in Davenport all along, who open enrolled out to a neighboring district when their child was in kindergarten, and then every sibling born after that older sibling would also be allowed to open enroll out. There was also, and continues to be, a good cause rule. And there are a lot of reasons listed under good cause. A few of those I just gave as an example would be extenuating circumstances, like a substantiated case of bullying and harassment where the school district was shown unable to address it, a change in marital status of the parents, severe health condition, foster care placement, etc. Like I said, there's a long list of those good cause rules. And then also the junior and senior rule. So if a student had attended a district up until their high school career and they chose to remain there, they could do so for their junior and senior year. That's very similar to continuing enrollment. The only reason I mention it here is that it's billed slightly differently. In all these other cases, the students who's open enrolled out are counted on Davenport Schools enrollment, and then the districts who are receiving our students send us an invoice twice a year. And so we basically just act as a flow through for state dollars coming into Davenport. They bill us for those dollars and we reimburse them. With juniors and seniors, they're actually just counted on the other district, and so they don't actually lead to an invoice. Here. Now, how did the law change the state that had existed prior to that? Well, House File 228 eliminated voluntary diversity plans statewide. And they also imposed some actions that the districts who previously had diversity plans, that they would have to go into effect. So for example, all of those families I mentioned who had applied to open enroll out prior to the change in the law, we had to contact them proactively and notify them that we would honor their request if they wished. Residents in those 5 districts, including Davenport, also the deadline for open enrollment for the 21-22 school year was waived. So until March 1st, anyone living in Davenport currently who wants to open enroll out may make an open enrollment request to a neighboring district, and that would be effective immediately. And also receiving districts can only deny entry to applicants if they have a lack of space in the grade level that is being applied for, if they do not have the IEP services needed to meet a student with special needs accommodations, or if that student was suspended or expelled from the previous district. And House File 847 comes into this as well because it removed a 90-day ineligibility period for open enrolled students. So previously, if you open enrolled out of a district, you need to wait 90 days before you'd be eligible for varsity sports. And what they did for this case in 847 is that they added some waivers to that 90-day ineligibility for students who are open enrolling with good cause. and also for any student who had previously attended one of the 5 districts who had had a voluntary diversity plan. I'm sure you're wondering how this has affected our district specifically. There's a lot of data on this page, so I'm going to walk through it somewhat slowly and give you a chance to process. There are obviously 3 data tables here. On the far left is the total amount of students who are open enrolled out of Davenport schools prior to the passage of House File 228. So keep in mind, those are all students grades K to 12, and there are quite a few students on here actually who have been open enrolled out of Davenport schools for many years, and in some cases their entire career. And you can see that was a total of 628 students in grades K through 12, some of whom have been open enrolled out, like I said, for possibly up to a decade or their entire school career. The middle table here shows the total number of additional open enrollments since the passage of House File 228. And I need to compare and contrast that table with the one on the far right. The far right table shows the students who previously would not have been allowed to open enroll out under our voluntary diversity plan. So it's all of those students minus the 9 that I mentioned earlier that we previously would have been able to keep their enrollment in Davenport Public Schools. So out of 292 students who have applied to open enroll out since the passage of the law, if the law had not changed, 150 of those students would still be attending here. This is my last slide, and I'm going to turn it over for questioning. And I'm sure that you guys are aware, I don't handle the financial aspect of it, but just keep in mind that each one of these students, it's roughly $7,500, give or take, that those students, when they leave, they take that money with them out of the district. And so I will turn it over to questions and collaborate with TJ on this.
Do any board members have questions? Director Beck.
Thank you for the presentation. I have one question, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, but I remember in the past hearing about people who had enrolled out of the district but paid tuition to that district. Was that at all any part of this? How did that work?
Yeah, so if a family had been denied, they could elect to pay tuition out to that other district, in which case they would not be listed on these numbers. These numbers are drawn from basically a giant spreadsheet that I inherited that lists all of the students who had applied to open enroll out of the district. And that means that we get an invoice for those students from one of these neighboring districts. They appear somewhere. So twice a year, we get invoices from all these districts. And then Kelsey Nyrink and I go through and we verify that we have those students on our list and that they are eligible to be billed by those districts. But you're right. There are families who elect when they are denied open enrollment that they just decide they're going to enroll and then they pay the tuition out of pocket as though it was a private school.
And would those students' dollars still come to Davenport then?
They would not, because they wouldn't be on our count.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions? Is this, I'm assuming this data is broken down by ethnicity as well, correct?
So that's problematic, and here's why. When families apply to open enroll, they use a form that is generated by the state, and that form does not contain their ethnic data. It doesn't request it or ask for it. So, like I mentioned, there are a great number of families who have actually never set foot inside of a Davenport school, either because they're on a continuing enrollment from a previous district. And so we have that data for students who have previously attended Davenport. We do not have that data for students who have not attended Davenport. And I have reached out to the state to ask if that could be included on the application moving forward. But that is a state level decision. Okay. It is something that we're looking into, seeing if we could ask families voluntarily to give us that data.
Okay. It's a lot of numbers I'm seeing open and rolling out, especially when the area superintendent said that they were pretty much at capacity and wouldn't be taking any students. So I just find that kind of funny that they've kind of went back on their word, but talk is cheap, obviously. Actions speak louder than words. Are there any other questions?
Director Gosa, if I could, I would tell you, Bettendorf Schools has informed us that their middle school is full. They are not accepting any more middle school applications. So there is some point where we'll get to, a balance where there will not be space in any grade level. But the only one that I'm aware of right now is Bettendorf, and I believe Pleasant Valley has indicated to us that they are very near full capacity as well. So all of these numbers came, the majority of these students applied, very early in the summer. And yeah.
No, I understand it. I think they told us that 6 months ago or something. But again,
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully they don't build any more houses. They're not going to have room for all their students. Director Beck.
I was just going to say, I think for me as a board member, the reason I would want to know sort of some of the demographic breakdowns is to find out if this was actually making a difference in terms of diversity plans anyway. And so if you are able to gather that information, I think some of us would appreciate hearing about it. Whether this exacerbates situations or it has no effect, we just don't know.
I can tell you right now that of the students who we do have demographic data on, that about 70% of those students are white. And that's compared with just over 50% of our student body that is white. So it is disproportionately students who identify as being white who are open enrolling out. I would also add that it's also important to note that, when families open enroll out, that's generally considered they're responsible for transportation of those districts. They're not going to receive a bus ride to a neighboring district to do that. So that's a barrier for a lot of families as well who don't have means. There is an option for families who are low income to receive reimbursement for transportation. And that's another cost that comes to us. We have a handful of families that request that. And that amounts to essentially $250 per semester per student for gas money. But you can imagine if a family doesn't have a working car, that doesn't do them a lot of good in terms of getting their students to a different district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Superintendent?
No, sir. Thank you.
Well, all right, Mr. Schultz, thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Hope you feel better.
Thank you. Me too.
All right, moving on. Board reports. Are there any board reports? Director Klein-Jerome.
I'm filling in for Director Hayes. We would like to offer our condolences to the family of Tonya Urbat, who passed away. Tonya was head of curriculum and worked with the math department for years. Don Ackelman, who was a music teacher in the elementaries. Shirley Reed, 40 years in administrative roles. And Ken Hines, who is also a coordinator, I believe, in the CTT program.
Thank you, Director Klein-Jerome. Director Beck, you had something?
Yeah, I'm going to make my usual request that people get vaccinated if they can and wear masks. I know there was a big change in legislation today, and we're not sure. I don't know what that means, but I still would like to request that everyone wear masks as much as possible.
Thank you. Are there any other board reports? It's too early in the school year to go to events and stuff. I get it. Director Beck.
Well, I can report on Davenport District's intermediate or junior high cross-country team. It's actually a really fun chance to watch all of our district and cheer for all of our district as one team. All of the intermediate schools or junior highs have the runners on one team called the Davenport Flyers. And I'm happy to say that in the girls category, Davenport has won both meets outright, or at least with one runner placing first. I don't know about the scores for the whole teams. And I look forward to attending some other sporting events as the school year gets going.
Thank you, Director Beck. Any other board reports? All right, seeing none, move on to open forum. Brenda, were there any?
No, online, just the one.
Okay. All right, and we have one open forum request tonight. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak, please fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The form is available in hard copy for in-person attendees or on the school board page of the district's website for those who want to participate virtually. Virtual participants must email their request to Brenda T. at tbrin@davenportschools.org by 3 p.m. on the day of the board meeting. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. Iowa Open Meetings laws prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president may set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We have one tonight, Mr. John Keeley.
John Keeley, 3240 Lorton Avenue, Davenport, Iowa. I'm also president of the Davenport Education Association. I am here on behalf of the members of the Davenport Education Association. In light of this afternoon's federal court ruling, I'm here to ask the board to reinstate the mask mandate for all Davenport Community School District staff and students, regardless of their vaccination status. The CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends the wearing of masks indoors in public to minimize protection from the Delta COVID-19 variant and possibly prevent spreading it to others in areas of that are substantial or of high transmission. Scott County is currently considered an area of high transmission, with cases in the Quad Cities amongst all population groups increasing drastically over the last few weeks. The majority of our students are still unvaccinated, including all of the under the age of 12 who remain ineligible to receive the vaccines, putting them at even greater risk for health complications. Masks are a proven effective method for reducing transmission of the COVID-19 virus. Mandating masks will help protect our most vulnerable students and staff from contracting the virus, thereby slowing the spread in our community. Masks may also prevent individuals from spreading other illnesses, in which will keep our students learning and in the classroom. The Davenport School Board's own priorities state that the board desires to improve the overall learning environment in our classroom, schools, and the district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Vaccinations, masking, distancing, hand washing, and proper ventilation have proven to help slow the spread for students, families, educators, and communities. Please reinstate the mask mandate in our schools so our teachers, staff members, and students can all remain in the classroom where they belong. Thank you. And go Saints.
Thank you, Mr. Keeley. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Snyder. Is there any discussion? Director Beck? No?
No.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board approve hold on one second. I move that the board approve the following resolution presented by the administration for the adoption of bills from the bill listing period of 8/18/21 to 9/7/21. Whereas resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the treasurer, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of 8/18/21 to 9/7/21.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Potts. Is there any discussion? Director Klein Jerome.
Can I just ask a question about the bill summary? The tri-state travel, is that typical that we aren't using our contracted bus service that for long distance we're using tri-state?
Typically, that's used for, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but for our sports and band participation.
That's correct. Typically, too, if there's not a number of buses available and people to drive, we will contract that out. And typically, that is for the furthest distance on that evening so that we get a little bit more return on our investment, so it's not a short trip. So the long trips, we can often, availability-wise, contract that out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Superintendent report.
None at this time.
That was where I was going to pause and get a drink, but we'll roll on through. Committee reports.
I can do one real quick if you need.
I'm sorry. Policy committee, you had a report.
Yes, the policy committee has begun a slightly more formal process of producing agendas before each meeting. And we are having a pre-meeting between the chair, the superintendent, and the board secretary the week before the policy committee meeting. We call that a subcommittee, who are going to make sure that we sort of have all our ducks in a row and figure out what each policy committee meeting is going to be about. And then we'll be able to run our policy committee meetings a little bit more efficiently. And we are continuing still to update all of our policies to language that is more in line with, and numbering that's more in line with the IASB.
Thank you. Are there any other committee reports? You guys have anything from LZAC or NADA? Finance?
Meet next week.
Okay. The only thing I have for legislative advocacy is the superintendent and I are going to start going around to city council meetings. And thank you, Mr. Vondran, for setting that stuff up for us. We appreciate it. And start getting out so everyone knows who we are and start working with them.
We go to Bluegrass next week.
That's right. And we will be at the Bluegrass City Council meeting next week. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, I will move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 10.01?
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board approve administration's recommendation of the administration regulations 103.2B, 103.2C, and 103.02C per school board policy 103.02.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Poston,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. We will now move on to discussion items. First item up for discussion, building budgets. I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, President Goza. One of our previous school board meetings, one of the board members did a board request about, sorry, Bruce. One of our board members did a board request about building budgets, allowable uses, things of that nature. And so Kevin did a study of other districts that look like us, and what he found was very interesting. And so I will ask that Kevin, would you mind presenting to us our building budgets, how we operate, what's in there, what isn't in there, and the direction that we're heading with our building budgets. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Sure. So first of all, when TJ asked me to look into this, if you remember, we started the year last year when we had some financial troubles, and if Gary is listening, Gary Sinclair, there was a comment made about building budgets, and we reduced building budgets straight out and had a freeze. And the comments were made, there is no carryover. If you don't have the funds in the general fund as a whole, you don't have carryover funds. You can't give dollars that don't exist. So we're kind of in a situation where we're starting over. So when I was looking at other districts, ironically, Iowa City is the most like us. Very similar enrollment, very similar in how they allocate building budgets. So I was looking at the template we've used historically, and I was looking at how Iowa City did their template. They were very kind to share that with me. And we looked at how we're spending our dollars. The most important thing that we can do is have building budgets that spend our dollars as close to the students as possible. I know I've said that before, and it bears repeating. So we did a building allocation, and we have just over $1 million, and I put that up there just to get the questions starting, that we allocate. It averages out to over $78 a pupil. Iowa City's about $69, $69 per pupil, so we are above what Iowa City does currently. There's always small nuances on what is expected to be paid out of those funds and what isn't. We give the building administration the authority to spend it the way they see fit, as close to the students, but we've given them some guidance so that the things that you see up there are the most important. It's not the entire list, but it's the most important items that they need to allocate for their building allocation. So the other part of this that you don't see up there, and it bears a conversation too, is our fine arts budget. We choose, and to me it's appropriate, we choose to pull out our fine arts budget from our buildings for various reasons. One of them is Steve Schwegler, for example. He does a really good job of keeping track of our band instruments. If there's a need for a set of band instruments at one building, and he knows they're not being used in another building, he is going to move them from building to building, because they're not that building's equipment, it's the district equipment, so that we're utilizing the resources we have currently as efficiently as possible. There's some big ticket items like marching band uniforms. There's several different categories where there's a lot of cost in your middle school and high school, and we pulled that out so that we can do that as a program. This way, the principals can focus on spending the dollars for the kids as close as possible. I always say library books is towards the top because everyone always asks, how are we getting library books? They need to allocate a certain amount for their buildings so that they can choose the books that they need for their media centers. We had a conversation indirectly with the principals. I think that was communicated to them about what they should be spending. I know historically there's been trying to save the funds to do large purchases, for example, playground equipment. Playground equipment is one of those things that I look at Josh and say, that is a PEPAL fund expenditure. We don't want to take away funds that should be here with students to a playground that we have other sources of funds that we can use for that purpose. I don't think that, to defend the principals, I don't think that's been a directive to them historically, that if they have something that they want to buy and they want to do some fundraising, that's fine. If they want to apply for grants, that's great, but we should use PEPAL funds to help them with that and leave the funds that they get per pupil for these type of materials. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Director Kleindro.
So you're saying that if we get new playground equipment, the district is paying for it? Because historically, PTAs have fundraiser, they've paid for it all.
I'll give you an example. We have some PTA funds, I believe. We have a local grant and our PEPAL funds that are paying for a playground. I can't remember what building it's at right now.
I want to say it's Walcott, but they don't pay for all of it. We pay for portions. So if there's if they raise $100,000 and they need $10,000 to contribute for concrete or something like that, we would contribute that amount.
Okay.
Just to fill that gap. I mean, if it was close, if there was a great distance in between what they raised and what we have, we're not going to spend an inordinate amount of money on that right now.
The fine arts. So if Central High needs new band uniforms, is that being paid for out of the district's money? Or again, are parent groups raising money and selling fruit and things like that in order to pay for those uniforms?
It's district money. We have a separate allocation that we do for fine arts that Rob used to do that, but we set this up before he even left about where we're going to spend those dollars, and that was communicated May, I believe, to what they're going to do. The fundraising things are more for their trips, those extra expenses for longer trips, but there's a rotation for the items they need that we look at ahead to schedule those type of large purchases.
One of the reoccurring themes with your question is, what's the district standard? What's the bar? So the board took a step to saying, this is our bar in fine arts. This is the budget. If you guys remember voting on that last May, I think it's May, what Kevin had just said. So this is our bar. If a group or an organization wants to go above and beyond what the bar is, then that's when you do a bake sale, or the PTA will come in and jump in. So right now we are going through many of our sections of our budget, finding out and really establishing the bar. What is it that the district should pay for using PEPAL, using SAVE, all these kinds, and put it on a rotation, and this is our bar. This is our standard in Davenport. That's going to be a really important part of our long-range facility plan as well as we move through that. Now, above and beyond that, what should a building or not be raising funds for? And that's going to be a critical conversation as we move forward. Because if it's our standard and it's our bar that we pay for this, then that will make our general fund dollars that go to our building budgets go much farther in the future. And it'll really help our buildings laser-like focus, spending those dollars, maximizing those dollars in our buildings. And I think that's, I believe you were the one that put the board request in for the building budgets, Karen, I believe. And that's the root of that question, because I think a lot of our buildings want to go above and beyond on some of these things that there should be a district bar for. So that's the direction that we're heading.
So this cycle, is this new then?
Brand new. And I wouldn't even say it's developed. It's still in its conceptual phase. So as we move forward, here's the district standard. And we always have to keep in mind the equity between each one of our buildings. And so a district our size, that's a constant struggle between a building-based budget and in Davenport, here's our standard for whether it be coaches or whether it be, this is the athletic program that we say we're going to have. And so that's a constant struggle that we have. And as we move forward, it's really important to say this is our standard. and continue to develop that. And establishing building budgets and establishing items that are really appropriate inside of our building budgets will ensure that we are being equitable and that we are having a district standard. We have some room to grow in that area.
I think it's good. Now everybody knows what money can be used for what in the cycle. I think that's a really plus.
We have a long way to go in that, but
Karen, I think that's a good point. I think the principals have done a really good job trying to advocate for their students. It's a matter of putting the budget with it so that you best utilize the sources of funds that you have. There's all kinds of grants, local grants, federal grants, state grants that help pay for some things, but getting that understanding of where it fits for a building allocation. Our principals have done a wonderful job. It just, as people move around and there's new staff, it's understanding exactly how we expect this small pot of money, relatively speaking, of how it should be spent, so it covers everything of our needs.
Director Beck?
Along those lines, I understand that, or I want to make sure I understand that building principals have some discretion in that, let's say we have a building where there's a larger number of students who, you know, don't have school supplies, standard things like pencils and whatnot, versus other schools where kids have plenty of that, but, you know, they need more library books or something like that. So principals have the ability to make those discretionary changes, right? We're not trying to make this constant at that level.
You're correct. Yes.
Okay. Because we want to make sure that at least I personally would like to make sure that we fit the needs to the school, you know, knowing that some schools need X and others need Y, and each school has sort of their own traditions as well, and activities that they do that may cost a small amount of money, you know, whether it be a certain type of celebration or a special lunch or, you know, something like that.
Absolutely, as long as it fits the proper use of general fund dollars. That's the only caveat I would add. The library books are one of those things. Every library is probably at a different level. Mm-hmm. And if they need to put a little more dollars into a certain series that fits their curriculum, mm-hmm. they should do that. If others do not need that, they might have something else that they want to do. They need to make that decision on how it best fits their building. I agree.
Director Poston?
I had a chance to visit with Kevin and, ahead of the meeting to get some of my questions answered. But when I made building visits last spring and winter, I know there were principals that were upset because of money being taken away. Now, Kevin will argue with me that that money was not there to be taken away, but that's not the way the principals look at it. So I just want to make sure that we communicate, and I think you're still trying to decide what kind of carryover there would be. What bothers me with no carryover, it's typical government again, spend it or lose it. And so I think there should be some sort of carryover. It gives the principals a little bit more leeway so that they can adjust from year to year. But we also need to make it clear, you know, where these funds need to be spent. Or if they're unsure, they need to make a call to Josh at operations and say, hey, you know, we need this at the building. Does this qualify coming from the district?
Yeah, we've started those conversations on what an appropriate carryover is. I agree with you, Kent, that we don't want to have a spend it or lose it, but we do need some modesty as far as we need to spend it on the kids today. They should have some leeway so they don't have to feel like they're spending the last dollar and spending the time and the effort to do that when they don't necessarily have an exact purpose for it. They need to have a purpose for it so they can put it exactly where it needs. And we do need to give them some carry forward to a degree. There have been some historically that had 100% carryover. That's over many, many years. That should be put to the kids now, not 5 years from now or 3 years from now.
And I think they can get help from their ILDs on this. That would be something that they could coordinate with the buildings that they cover.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? The only thing I'll say, I'm glad you guys are putting something in place to set the district standard. I think that's good. Then every building knows where they're at. And also at the same time, every building principal knows where they're at and what they got. And then hopefully that eliminates, because obviously each one of them is going to politic for their building because they're going to want to get that stuff done. And that'll hopefully eliminate trying to politic board members to push their stuff, as well as, you know, administrators and things like that. So, you know, everybody knows this is the slice of the pie you get, what you do with it in your building. So that I'm glad we're moving in that direction. Any other discussion on this? If you got anything you wanted to add? All right, we will move on to data cycle review.
One of the first things that we asked Dr. Lisa Stevenson to put together with the learning results teams was a cyclical review process for how we look at data in the district. And so she has met with her team, reviewed the Davenport plan to make sure that we were in line. And today we're bringing forth a review pattern that has the board reviewing data on a regular cadence. I love the word cadence because it's very similar to the finance committee. It's something that we can recognize a pattern. We know when it's coming, and that's exactly what we need to get ourselves in the habit of. And so, Dr. Stevenson, if you wouldn't mind walking us through the document that you've prepared for us. We are asking for feedback from the school board. Also, we've had board requests on what about this type of data and what about this type of data. And so having our learning and results department review, when is it appropriate to look at this data? Because one of the last things that we want to do is gather data just to gather it. We want to make sure it's in an appropriate time and inside of our cycle. And so, Lisa, if you wouldn't mind kind of walking us through what we have, and we're really looking for feedback from the board tonight in order to move forward. Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. And thank you, Brenda, for putting the display up there for everyone to see. This is a draft that we wanted to present to you to get some feedback to make sure this meets the board's needs in terms of staying informed throughout the school year. About the many pieces of data that we collect to help inform how we utilize our resources and what the needs of our staff are. So if you'll see up there, the first tab that you're looking at is the Master Committee of the Whole plan. So looking across the top, we hope to start this on October 4th and then proceed every month after that to use the COW format for groups to come here and present data to you. And you'll see there on the gray on the left side, that is a collection of many things. Many of them are state or federal assessments that we're required to give as a local school district. And they inform a lot of the categorical funds that Kevin helps myself and others manage, like at-risk funds, preschool funds, ELL funds, etc., gifted and talented. And you as board members make decisions around those budgets and funds all year long. So we want you to be able to know what's happening in those programs and how we're doing. And in terms of the presenters you see there, those are some placeholders of people that will be the main points of contact for that work. But again, the presenters and groups can be altered. If I have heard from a few board members, you enjoy having teachers present. So if we can get teachers to help us we'll definitely do that. In green, in row 2 and 6, those were meant to stand out because we've identified as part of our Davenport plan that the bulk of our work this year in professional learning will be connected to early literacy as well as PBIS. And so from those two groups, we want to present to you 3 times. We want to talk to you in October to share our beginning of the year data. And then again in February, we'll share our mid-year January assessments, and then again in June with our end of the year May data. And at the bottom, there are just a few notes. If you can scroll up a little bit, Brenda. You might notice that special education, for example, does not have its own meeting, but students with IEPs are included in all of our data that we're analyzing as subgroups. So we'll have that embedded in each of our presentations. And then the next one, I wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like before it comes to you as a board. So October 4th is our first committee of the whole, hopefully. And our topic is PBIS. And within that presentation, we'll share with you the conditions for learning results, which just came back to the district a couple weeks ago. We'll talk about behavior as collected in the data that is known as ODRs, or Office Discipline Referrals. We also have suspension and expulsion data, because those are all metrics that we use to measure how safe our schools are. And there are some, like I said, names there of people who will be involved in the presentation. But what's most important that I hope you're tuning into there is our timelines. So we do know that we have to adhere to getting information to Brenda. Brenda made all the tabs there because she gets that information to board docs. So with that in mind, we try to work backwards from the first Monday of the month and then back map that to getting that to Brenda on the Wednesday or Thursday before that. And so before we even get to that point, we want to have various groups having an eye on our presentation and having input from them about what we're missing, what we're including, what's confusing. And so that starts, for example, September 6th, last week, we had a work team meeting where a group reviewed using the data review tool, which in Davenport's called an AROD, looked at all of the data. And then from there, that group makes presentations to the cabinet, at principals meetings, the 3 different principals meetings, so that those groups can then share back with their BSATs, hopefully that week before the board sees it. And then we also have a teacher calibration team. That's not, you don't see that listed on this chart, but that happens in between the work team, usually in the cabinet, because we want to hear what our teacher teams are thinking so that they can help inform what professional learning and actions will take as a result of the data that we see. The topics on the bottom each month, I'm sorry, if you go back to the master real quick there, Brenda, and then scroll up just a little bit. Oops. Those first 10 items in column A, some of them are mandatory reporting and others are just things I've listened to all of you comment on in the last couple months. As TJ said, presentations that the board has specifically asked for. So you'll be able to hear about our gifted and talented students, our teacher leadership and compensation system. And then at the very top, I know we had a request for math data, for example. Math is coming up here, I think in November. So college and career readiness and CTE, graduation rate, dropout rate, that's one of our big priorities in Davenport also, especially with our community support. And so what I would ask now, I think TJ, your idea was that are there things as a board that you want to have data presentations on that maybe are not included in this list that we could tie into the existing list, or maybe on top of all of that? I think preschool is on there too as one. I know the board had a lot of interest in the early childhood side. We also plan to have a common slideshow template so that every time we get in front of you with different groups, it'll be a similar look for you, so you can see what our current state is, what our baseline data is, what our most recent data is, and how our subgroups performing within that data, and what are we as a system doing in terms of setting goals, and then the work that we need to do to achieve those goals. So at that, I'm done. So if anyone has any questions or suggestions tonight or anytime in the near future.
Thank you, Lisa.
Director Poston.
I just have a question under the at-risk program. When I was visiting the different buildings, a lot of principals were frustrated with how truancy was being handled. It was kind of just being, from what they were telling me, just being neglected. What has changed, and how are we going to address truancy?
Thank you. We'll definitely add that to that report.
That's a great question, because I think too, a lot of these things from the board director's seat, we have policies, right, that guide our response to a lot of the things like truancy, and then handbooks that we develop and practices. So that would be something for us to make sure to highlight, is what board policies or other connections do we have to some of these data presentations.
Director Klein-Jerome.
And I realize special ed falls under a lot of these, but I would like special ed in terms of the citations, like we received the last time, so we know where we are and hours still need. So in special ed, just in terms of the citations. I would also like to see that the board have this calendar so that I could go back later in a month or two and go, okay, when are we going to see about this? So if somehow we could get access to where this calendar would be. And I would like to see teachers included where it's appropriate. Some of these, I can't see a teacher involved in this, but there are others that I'm sure they could be.
Director Beck.
Yeah, I appreciate this table. I am with Director Klein-Jerome that just this sort of layout of when we're going to hear about different things would be super helpful to have access to, because then when you're thinking, oh, I haven't heard about this in a while, I wonder when it's going to come up, it gives you an idea. And also, I do agree that it would be helpful for those that it's possible to have is a teacher to talk about sort of how they're gathering the data, how the process has been going. And it doesn't have to be every time, but I think, we want to make sure that we're not overburdening our teachers with all of our work as well. So for me, that would be something helpful. But again, I don't want to burden the teachers with having to come to extra meetings either. And so, of course, it's only, if it's a possibility. But I really like this layout, and I like the planning, and I think it's a great way to get us on a cycle of regular review. So thank you.
Any other questions from this side of the room? I don't want you two to feel left out.
I had one other thing I would like input on too. When we presented on August 2nd, the early literacy plan, one of the promises that we made to you was that we would set up opportunities to showcase the work and the materials that you're approving for us to purchase. And so this has come into play right away in October, because we just had some new materials for literacy. And so the one thing that I've asked a lot of people, and it's kind of been a flip of the coin, but if we are going to coordinate small, not quorum size groups of board members to go visit schools to see early literacy in action, or a tag or science or something, would you as a board prefer that we front load that and that it happen like the week before the cow about that? Or would you prefer to go after the presentation so you have something to kind of hang your visit on because you've learned about it at the presentation?
So myself personally, I guess I would like it before, but then after, so then we can bring that to the conversation. and I'm glad you brought up the early literacy because I keep forgetting to say this, but I did want to put this out to all of the elementary principals, and I want to put this out to all my board members. If you have, since our big focus is early literacy, if you have a classroom that you would like us to come and set in, I'm not saying all of us at once, but we can go around to the different buildings and help out with that, because we should lead by example. And I actually, myself, I love going in there and having the kids read to me and things like that. So I have publicly put that out there for all of the building elementary principals to let us put our money where our mouth is. If you want us to come with the class, get with Brenda, and she can schedule something for board members. Because we preached and preach early literacy, so we got to take action ourselves. So I appreciate you reminding me on that.
You're welcome. And I think maybe because we have to have small groups of you, maybe we could have an option. We have a group that visits before the presentation and a group, we could put those two options
I
out
think
there.
it would be good to put together a plan and present that to the school board. So I think that's something we definitely can do moving forward. So that's a great idea to get our board involved. And they have said that they would like to do that in the past. So I think that would be good to put together a formal presentation for them. That's a wonderful idea. Thank you, Lisa.
Also, I will say the agenda committee, we did leave a placeholder for the data reviews for every committee of the whole, whatever that review is going to be. There is a placeholder for every committee of the whole for this. Is there any other questions or comments? Again, I'll say I appreciate the presentation. I like the format. Thank God we're not dealing with Gantt charts anymore, nothing like that. But I like that you have the people that are going to be accountable for it and all that. And it like the other directors have said, if we have kind of a placeholder to that so we can see, so we keep that going with everything else we're doing. So again, I appreciate you taking the time presenting that to us. With that, we will move on to purchase trucks for maintenance. Am I turning it over to you?
Absolutely. Josh has a plan to get us on the right path with our purchase for our trucks of our maintenance department. So Josh, go ahead. Thank you.
We have the need for 2 new trucks for the maintenance department. We have a little rotation going on where we replace 1 or 2 a year. We have 1 truck from 1997 that is falling apart, and we have another truck that's from 2008 that doesn't have a lot of miles on it, but they're not easy miles. They're used for plowing snow, hauling parts, pulling trailers, a lot of miscellaneous things. They're not used for driving from here to Des Moines or anything like that. They're just trucks we use within the maintenance department. We went out for bid to 4 different dealerships. Courtesy Ford is our local dealership with the lowest bid. So I'd like to purchase 2 trucks for $77,000, $77,622. Any questions?
These trucks will have plows and everything like that, right?
Yep, they'll have plows on them. They're all quoted the same. They have the same plows put on the front of them. We do a lot of our own snow plowing, not at all the buildings, but the majority of our buildings every winter.
Director Beck.
Just a question. So with the older trucks, I know you said you'd put them up for auction if they're safe. Mm-hmm. Is there a way we can maybe use those in our auto mechanics program and put them towards an educational use, particularly if they're not safe to drive anymore, right? They each have an engine.
We can, there's one of the 2 of the trucks might be good for that use. I haven't specifically gone through and got a quote to see what we could get for it, but there's 1 truck that we could probably pretty easily do that with.
Okay. I just think, if we can't sell them off, we shouldn't just let them go to waste, because I think they could potentially be a perfectly good learning tool, potentially.
Yeah, as long as they're safe to be on hoists and things like that.
Exactly.
Yep, totally.
Exactly. And then, so I appreciate that you went to all of the different dealerships and looked at quotes there. And so each one is going to come with the quotes you've gotten. Basically, each one comes with the same type of equipment.
Yep.
And so we're just comparing prices, really apples to apples with prices.
Yep. They're given a specific model of a truck and use that model. There's either like type A, type B. It's really specific. We tell them what model that is, and they give us a quote based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Director Clandero.
I'd just like to say thank you for going forward. And the other thing is, so the 2008 is in worse shape than the 2002 that has more miles?
No. Well, yeah, we look at, yeah, you're right. We look at the vehicles based on their usage and things they've done in the past and what kind of condition they're in. I mean, it really depends on what they're used for more often. For some reason, that truck's just in a little bit rougher shape than the older one. So.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? I want to say thank you for getting quotes on American-made vehicles.
No problem.
I greatly appreciate that. Director Beck, you had something.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask, is do we only purchase Ford, or is there a reason? Is it easier for us to maintain? Is it tradition, history?
I would just say that it's easier for us to maintain spare parts, oil, like products, things that can exchange between trucks.
Yeah.
Things like that. So if we start going into different trucks and different brands, it can change things up and we have to stock more stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I do appreciate the American-made trucks, so thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? If you got diesels, they would probably go 600,000 miles. I'm just saying. They probably last 50 years with those miles we put on them.
It's possible.
All right, so everyone would be good voting on the purchase of these at the next meeting. All right, we'll move on to, I'm gonna say that wrong. Is it Fortinet? Fortinet renewal contract.
Lisa, do we have that right? Fortinet. So Lisa and I are here. Lisa is going to be representing this product. Basically, this is our firewall product that we have inside the district, which allows our students to be outside of our district and still utilize our Chromebooks. Lisa, do you have anything to add to this product?
There's an attachment to there too that came directly from Gary that I think maybe gives a little bit more explanation, but basically the VPN is our virtual private network, and it's important that we have a strong VPN so that we can maintain compliance with state and federal, there's so many acronyms, SIPA, which is the Children's Internet Protection Act. So that is, and so this is installed on our mobile devices like this. It supports staff when they're working from home or teaching from home, away at trainings, etc. And after talking with Gary, he was saying that, this is really, the cyber defense conversation is becoming bigger and bigger. And so he's confident and within this industry that this was the right product that we should be continuing to use.
Director Beck.
I noticed that this says that it was up on September 8th. And so 2 questions. One, are we in a 5-day no man's land right now? And 2, shouldn't we have been able to vote on this prior to that date? And I would request that we do that in the future.
Thank you for the feedback. And yes, if it is up on September 8th, it should have been taken care of before then. Okay. And we need to make sure that we're doing that in the future. Thank you. And Lisa, I would assume that the product that we have is on a continuing contract until we approve.
Right. So yes, it says it's renewable. And so in my experience, whenever we're working with companies like this, they understand that different districts have different board meeting times and dates. And so they don't cut us off, so to speak, while we're waiting for a board approval.
Okay.
Director Poston.
Do we ever look at different companies on this, or is it because of the rollover from year to year? Is that hard to do?
It is difficult to change softwares like that. I do not know what kind of replacement cycle we are where we go out for bid, but that would be another good clarifying question I could get the board an answer to. Thank you.
That's a great question. And I know, TJ, you had mentioned, I think the AEA, or someone at least from the AEA, was supporting us with our cyber defense audit. So that's probably a heavy word for it, but kind of making sure we have the right things that we need, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And so this was part of the conversation. I don't know, Director Poston, if that means there's a less expensive product out there, but I know this at least was the most secure product that we could choose.
Are there any other questions? I'm assuming this will be on to vote for the next meeting. Is there any other information that you all would need to feel comfortable voting on it? All right, thank you. Next item is the tag contract.
So when the district, I would like to remind the school board that in our major budget cuts from several years ago, one of the things that the school board urged administration to do was to outsource, to look for places where outsourcing would be possible. And we essentially eliminated our communications department and outsourced that with Tag Communications. I will have to say, in that time frame, we have really began to control the narrative of our district. We began telling our story, and an accurate story, and we've began to develop strong relationships with our media partners, and that is through the utilization of Tag. And so this contract is up. It is not. There is no financial change to the contract, and there are no change in contractual language. I would say the one main difference is that the Tag really represents the district, whereas in the past that it might have been more focused on less board activities and more directed toward school activities. So this contract is up for your discussion and questions to be voted upon the next regular business meeting.
Are there any questions? Director Beck.
I guess I would say I don't remember specifically requesting outsourcing, but I know that our capabilities to control the narrative and to share our good information were quite limited. And so I think we did make a good decision to go with Tag, and we've seen a lot of good things come out of that. So I appreciate that. I just don't want anyone to think that we specifically decided to go out of house to look for this. And I don't remember doing that. But we were looking for the best, most cost-effective, and most efficient way to help improve our ability to communicate with our community. And having someone who's an expert or a team of experts do that, I think it became clear that we needed to go with a group that was outside of our own walls at the time. But I appreciate what they've been doing, so I'm okay with continuing.
Director Potts.
I think we've seen the positive results of hiring professionals to handle and help us with our branding, our public relations, and our communications, our websites, and the like. I think in addition to which, in the near future, with our enrollment issue, it's going to become very important if we are going to address that and turn that around,
that our communications and how we highlight those things in the district that are positive, that provide kids with huge opportunities that don't exist other places. Our communications arm is going to be, it's a cliche, but the tip of the spear in communicating that so that we can reduce this migration. Because if we can't, we're going to be on a continuing downward spiral financially. And conversations about building budgets and carryovers are going to be like, okay, you're building budgets at $3.80. Good luck.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Everyone will be good on voting on the renewal of this next meeting? All right. To answer your question, Director Beck, I don't think the board specifically put anything about outsourcing. Just what we had going at the time was ineffective and not working. We were finding out things on social media before anybody knew what was going on and stuff like that. I think Mike and his team have been a huge asset, but also at the same time, it's helped us with our media partners, which we have some decent Quad City Times reporters now, so we appreciate you, Mr. Watt, that actually write a good story. But again, the partnership with TAG's been a good thing. We've been able to do a lot of things, I think, so look forward to carrying that on. With that, I will move on to the next subject, discussion on policy 601.01 and 601.02.
Yes, so these are the next in our section of policies that are being brought before you using the IASB template and numbering system. These are not different significantly from what we already do, and so this would be their first discussion. But again, they're pretty much what we already do, and so we, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. This is, again, 601.02 on the school day and 601.01 on the school calendar.
Director Klein-Durham.
So a snow day can now count as a student day. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
I didn't hear what you said.
If we now have a snow day, that can count as a student day. It says when the school is forced to close due to weather or other emergencies, the part of the day during which school is in session will constitute a school day. Will create administrative regulations necessary to utilize any remote learning opportunities that are available and permitted by law. During the period of closure, remote learning opportunities will count towards instructional time requirements. Because I thought that wasn't the case. So this is new, or am I reading it right?
It's permitted, but it's not permitted right now.
So we, this is if you have a remote learning, pivot to remote learning, districts that do that, that would then count as instruction time. We are not currently set up to do that.
Are we going to have a policy that allows that?
That's a good question.
As of right now, we are not allowed. That is not a part of our plan, and we are not allowed to do that. So in the future, that can be something that we look at.
Mm-hmm. The second part of it, as far as the part of the day that was in session will constitute a school day, I don't know what the current legal, I don't know if it's like a baseball game. You have to play a certain number of innings for it to count as a full game.
Well, we don't do days, though. We do hours. However many hours they put in, that counts towards the 1080.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It used to be that way, Dr. Beck.
Okay. But as of now, this is about giving us flexibility in terms of what we can do with instruction days or instruction time, but we are not currently going to be doing any remote snow days. Does that make sense?
I just want to clarify it because it sounds like we could, but you're saying we aren't, so I just want everybody because I have had people ask me, can snow days count if we do remote learning? And I said no, and then I read this, I thought, well,
It's a very frequent question I get as well.
yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
We can certainly amend the language to specify either, we don't want to necessarily leave it out right now if we don't want to have to rewrite the whole policy if things change. On the other hand, we could certainly look at amending the language so that it is a little bit more specific to our situation. So if remote learning is allowed and the district chooses to adopt that model, then it would count as an instructional day. So we could do something like that, and it wouldn't require us to rewrite the policy should we change our practice. Okay.
That's good feedback.
Anything else?
For clarification, if you're talking about rewriting this, then it would come back again for discussion if you rewrite it.
It's already going to come back for discussion again. So
Well, yeah, but I'm saying it would have to go back for the first reading. So.
it depends on how much is rewritten, really.
Okay.
So if it's just a sentence
Because
or
what
two.
we did was a sample from the ISB, right?
Correct. Correct. So
I'm good with just leaving it how it is.
okay, we can if we change it substantially, we'll bring it back for first discussion. If it's just a sentence or something or adding a phrase, we'll continue on this cycle. But that's a good question. I will make sure that we're doing that properly. Anything else?
All right, so now we will move on to subject 11.07, policy 600, options 1 and 2 for discussion. I will turn it over to Director Beck, Chair of the Policy Committee.
So this policy is ISB provides 2 sample policies here. Option 1 is a sort of a broader description of this policy. This policy is titled Goals and Objectives of the Educational Program. And really what it gets at is very similar to Policy 100, which we have not revamped yet because that is essentially the philosophy of the district, right? And so it's a very specific statement about what the district sees as important and values, and essentially aligns with the mission and vision statement. So we put off revising that 100 because we need it to align with our CRVP work, okay? And so as we were going through our policies, we realized that this policy 600, which kind of outlines the goals of the educational program, is sort of part of that big picture. And so really what we needed to decide as a board is how specific do we want to be in outlining the goals and objectives of the educational program. And so we felt like, as a policy committee, we felt like that needed broader discussion than just a suggestion from the policy committee. So option 1, Brenda, if you could bring that one up on the screen. Option 1 is kind of lengthy. It includes language that is specific to, these are specific things that we expect our students to be able to do once they've completed their education in our district. And then at the bottom, the last paragraph there suggests that an advisory committee of representatives from the district community is appointed to make recommendations. And generally speaking, this is that local school improvement advisory commission, which we have, or the SIAC as it's called in some other districts. But this goes beyond that. It's also a committee that will provide feedback on the progress toward achievement of the educational goals and objectives. Policy option 2, Brenda, if you wouldn't mind bringing that one up, is much shorter and really just says we are going to try and achieve the philosophy statement of the school district. The community will, an advisory committee of community members and district members will be appointed to make recommendations, which is exactly what our local school improvement advisory committee does. And that the short-term and long-term objectives are established annually by the board and the objectives will reflect the needs. Basically, it's a much broader statement that isn't specific to our educational philosophy as much as the other statement is. And so what we felt like was important for us to figure out is how the board feels about each of these options. Do we need an educational philosophy or a goals and objectives of the education program that is very broad and sort of just touches the surface, or do we want something more specific like option 2? And so that's why we brought it to you all tonight, to find out sort of what your feelings are as to which route we might want to go. And of course, we'd have to tailor it a little bit to our own district. So, Mr. Potts.
I prefer the more specific.
Okay. So do you have sort of a reason behind that?
If the public looks at our policy and they see one that is 9 sentences and doesn't say much, you're not communicating anything. Whereas the first policy has bullet points that are relatively focused and specific, that have, I think, goals that are mutually acceptable and agreeable to everybody.
Okay. I appreciate that. Okay. I'm just going to go around the table unless somebody wants to jump in. Director Snyder? I'm following Dan's lead.
I agree with Bruce that a little more definitive in this case, I think is worth it. Normally, I would say a broader policy, but I kind of like the definitive nature of this.
Okay. Director Gosa?
I as well agree with Director Potts.
Okay. And do you think you have reasons why, or just?
I think it looks a lot more polished, and I don't really like them just basic and plain Jane.
All right. Director Klein-Jerome?
I actually prefer brevity, so I do like the other one, but I can understand why you'd want it really spelled out, because at some point we will not be sitting here at this board, and so another board would have more of a focus. So I could go along with this, but I really do prefer the brevity of the other one.
Thank you. And Director Poston?
Option 1. I don't think option 2 tells us anything.
Okay. So the more specific one with the bullet points, correct? Okay. I think I presented them backwards, but you get the idea. Superintendent Schneckloth, do you want to weigh in?
I prefer the more detailed version as well. It kind of helps administration to move forward on more firm ground.
Okay. I think we have our marching orders as a policy committee, so we will take that option with the bullet points and make sure it fits our district and go from there. Thank you, everyone.
All right. We're on to board requests. Right now I have one. Are there any other board requests? All right. This board request is from Director Poston. Date of request 9/13/2021. Item requested: a request for information. Description of request: Why do we not have an assistant cross-country coach for Davenport Schools intermediate team? Why are you making this request? There are 50 students out for the Davenport intermediate team. I feel this warrants an additional coach. When would you like this information? ASAP. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. Last call for board requests. Are there any other board requests? All right, administrative reports.
I have two at this time. This Thursday, we have a state school board meeting where President Goza and Vice President Hayes and myself will be attending to report the progress report that we shared with our local school board at the previous school board meetings. So we will be traveling up there and sharing our story. The second one is I would like to formally congratulate retired Sergeant Andy Nyrink back to Davenport Schools as our security personnel. I've only heard wonderful things about that appointment. And so, Sergeant, thank you for joining our team in such a very critical time. And you really bring a lot to our team. So thank you so much for stepping up. That's all at this time.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Oh, wait a minute.
Second.
Now you got a motion on the
Too
floor.
late.
All right, you got me. There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, meeting adjourned.